They say some are born with two souls. In old Poland, villagers feared that when one soul died, the other remained behind, rising from the grave as something hungry, something unnatural. Livestock were found dead, families fell mysteriously ill, and glowing eyes were said to watch from the darkness. Tonight we're uncovering the legend of the Struga. What's up, and welcome back, Deadheads, here in ecstatic order. I'm your host, Mac, and I am so glad to have you back here with us and spending another Thursday with us. Tonight is a special one because we're kicking off the first Uprooted episode of the season, where we'll be stepping outside our usual Appalachian stomping grounds and exploring folklore, mysteries, and legends from strange tales from around the world. Now, we're on the downhill slide of summer, and I don't know about y'all, but I am more than ready for cool evenings, a warm mug of coffee, and something spooky playing on the TV. Maybe it's the change of the season, or maybe I've always just had a soft spot about autumn. Either way, it feels like the perfect time to dive into a chilling piece of old world folklore. Now, for centuries, stories have been passed down about creatures lurking in the darkness, feeding on fear, superstition, and sometimes even the living themselves. And tonight's legend comes to us from Poland, and it's where whispers of a terrifying being known as, and before I say it, I know we have Polish listeners, so I have really studied the pronunciation guides and listened to tutorials on how to say this word and how this word is pronounced. So the best my English-speaking tongue can do for this word is tonight's going to be about the Struga. And this creature has haunted villages for generations. So settle in, Deadheads, grab your drink of choice, and get comfortable, because tonight we're traveling across the Atlantic Ocean and to the heart of Slavic folklore to uncover the legend of the Struga. Now, before we jump into tonight's episode, here's a quick, strange, but true story for you. Most people know the legend of King Arthur and the sword and the stone, but what if I told you there was a real sword embedded in a stone that still exists to this very day? In the 12th century, a Tuscan knight named Galliano Guidotti reportedly experienced a vision of the archangel Michael, inspired him to abandon his violence, and he took his own sword, drove it into a rock as a symbol of peace and a devotion. According to this tradition, the sword remains there to this day. Now, naturally, many people assumed it was just a fake sword, that it wasn't actually in the rock in a later edition. But in 2001, scientists examined the artifact and actually found out that the visible portion of the sword and the section embedded inside the stone are part of the same genuine medieval weapon. So while it may not be Excalibur, there really is a century-old sword stuck in a stone in Italy, and it's one of those rare cases where history sounds a lot like the legend. And this episode is brought to you by Merlin's Munchie Coffee Company. If you're looking for your next favorite cup of coffee, Merlin Munchies has over 30 flavors, blends, and single origin coffees to choose from. Available in both whole bean and ground option. Summer may be winding down, but there's still time to enjoy seasonal favorites like S'more Slayer, Hazelnut Hippies, and Peanut Butter Cup Pyramid, just to name a few. Alongside a huge selection of unique roasts crafted from every kind of coffee for every kind of coffee lover. Whether you're starting your morning, setting in with a good book, or listening to your favorite paranormal podcast late at night, Merlin Munchies has a brew for the occasion. Head over to Merlin Munchies Coffee Company and use code DAF10, that's DAF10 at checkout to save 10% on your next order and put the magic back in your morning or night. This episode is also sponsored by Red Herring Games. If you're looking for a new challenge for game night, Red Herring Games offers a variety of mystery, deduction, and puzzle-based experiences that are perfect for families, friends, and anyone who loves solving the unknown. Whether you're piecing together clues or testing your detective skills, there's something for every kind of sleuth. Visit Red Herring Games and use code DEADAIRFILES at checkout to save 10% off your order. Now, back to the show. Okay, well, now that we've got everything covered, I think it's time to go ahead and get into Strga's explanation and story and folklore here. So, hold your drink snug, pull up your blanket, and prepare yourself for Dead Air Files. So, to understand the legend, and I'm going to keep saying this word, and hopefully I'm saying it right, and hopefully if I say it enough times, it will sound perfect. But to understand the legend of the Strga, we have to travel back to rural Poland several centuries ago, long before electricity, paved roads, or modern medicine or amenities. Imagine a small farming village surrounded by dense forest as the sun disappeared beyond the trees. Darkness settled quickly across the countryside, and the only light came from candles, fireplaces, and the occasional lantern. Wolves prowled the woods, disease could sweep through a community without warning, and many people rarely traveled farther than their neighboring village. So Poland had been a Christian nation for centuries, but many older Slavic beliefs still lingered beneath the surface. Villagers attended church, carried crosses, and sought blessings from priests, yet stories of spirits, demons, and restless dead remained deeply woven into their everyday life. Sounds pretty familiar. Sounds kind of like the 1600s here when Christians had a strange belief about constant fears of witches and ghosts and stuff like that. So pretty wild to see the similarities kind of shown through here. So the roots of Strga stretch back to these ancient pagan traditions. Over time, old folklore blended with the Christian beliefs, transforming mysterious spirits into creatures feared as servants of evil. By the 1600s and 1700s, belief in the Strga had become whispered throughout parts of rural Poland, such as the shadowed slopes of Świętokrzyskie, the rolling countryside of Małopolska, and deep into the forest of Podkarpacie. The stories of the Strga haunted the Polish countryside for centuries. Now, the legend itself. Long before modern Poland existed, before church steeples dotted the countryside, and long before written history recorded the fears of ordinary people, Slavic tribes told stories of dark spirits that walked between the worlds of the living and the dead. From these ancient beliefs emerged one of Poland's most terrifying legends, the Strga. The origins of this stretch back to pre-Christian Slavic folklore. Many historians believe the creature's name may actually be connected to the Latin word strix, a mythical night bird said to prey upon human flesh and blood. Over centuries, as Christianity spread across Poland, older pagan beliefs mixed with newer religions, traditions, and spirits once viewed as mysterious forces of nature became associated with evil, curses, and restless dead. Unlike many monsters of folklore, a Strga was not believed to be created after death. According to the legend, it was born. Villagers believe certain children entered the world already marked by a curse. A child born with unusual physical features, perhaps an extra row of teeth, different colored eye, a distinctive birthmark, or some other uncommon trait might be viewed with suspicion. In some versions of the legend, a Strga possessed two hearts and two souls. While one soul belonged to the mortal world, the other was something darker, something that did not belong among the living. For much of their lives, these individuals might appear completely normal. They worked, married, raised families, and lived among their neighbors. Yet many believe the curse remained hidden beneath the surface, waiting for death to awaken it. When a Strga died, only one of its souls was said to pass on. The second remained trapped inside the corpse, unable to find peace. It would eventually rise from the grave and return to the world of the living. Descriptions of the creature varied from region to region, but most portrayals were horrifying. The Striga was often described as a pale and gaunt figure with sunken-in features, dark eyes, long claws, and sharp teeth. Some stories depicted it as a corpse-like figure wrapped in burial cloths, while others described a more monstrous form with animalistic traits. In certain legends, it could even transform into an owl or other nocturnal creatures, silently gliding through the darkness in search of its next prey. And prey was exactly what it sought. The Striga was feared as a predator of both people and livestock. Some tales claimed it drank blood, leading many modern researchers to compare it to the vampires of Eastern Europe. Other stories suggested it consumed flesh, attacked travelers, or spread disease through entire communities. If a village experienced a sudden illness, unexplained deaths, or livestock losses, whispers sometimes began that a Striga had returned from the grave. The creature was said to be most active at night, slipping through the forest and wandering lonely roads under the cover of darkness. Parents warned children not to stray too far from their home after dark, and travelers avoided isolated paths. Every unexplained sound outside a cottage window became a possible sign that something unnatural was moving through the darkness. And again, just another comparison here to Appalachian folklore. It sounds to me that this is just another one of those tales that is told to kind of like warn of the darkness. Like, you know, you don't know what's lurking out in the dark. You don't know what is out there. Like, the safety is to be inside and be where the light is and stuff like that. And it also kind of sounds like a fear of things that you didn't understand as well. And, you know, Appalachian has got plenty of things like that. Anytime illness or anything spread, as we talked about, like with the Witch of Pungo, it automatically turns to you're a witch and you're an evil person, because if you don't understand it, therefore it has to be evil. And it seems that, of course, a lot of Slavic folklore kind of relates, as almost all folklore does. And I just truly find that so fascinating. But the fear of the Striga became so widespread that the communities developed elaborate and often disturbing methods to prevent the dead from returning. And to me, this is the most interesting part of the entire folklore surrounding the Striga. Not so much the lore of the creature itself, but actually how people of the time decided to take care of this situation. If a person was suspected of carrying the curse in life, villagers often took extra precautions after death. Some bodies were buried face down, based on the belief that if the creature awakened beneath the earth, it would dig deeper into the ground rather than towards the surface. Heavy stones might be placed across the chest or inside the grave to pin the corpse in place. Iron objects, believed by many European cultures to possess protective qualities against evil, and again, something that here in Appalachia, you see many iron gates and iron bars around graves to protect their loved ones from evil spirits, you know, and here is the same exact thing, where sometimes buried with the dead. So in more extreme cases, though, the suspected Strigas could be decapitated, staked, or otherwise mutilated before burial to ensure they would never rise again. And while these practices may sound shocking today, they reflect a very real fear in the villages of 17th and 18th century Poland. Death was a constant companion. Disease could sweep through a community without warning. Infant mortality was tragically common. Medical knowledge was very limited, and people often searched for explanations when tragedy struck. If several villagers became sick after a funeral, if livestock suddenly began dying, or if unexplained deaths occurred in rapid succession, rumors could spread quickly, and some believed a Striga had returned from its grave and was feeding upon the living under the cover of darkness. And to the people who told these stories, The Struga was more than just a monster. It was an explanation for the unexplainable. It gave a face to disease, misfortune, and the fear that death itself might not be final. Every strange noise beyond the tree line, every shadow moving between the cottages, and every unexplained illness became part of a larger story, one in which the dead could walk among the living once more. Perhaps that's why the legend endured for centuries. The Struga lived on at a crossroads of two worlds. It carried traces of ancient Slavic pagan beliefs while also absorbing fears and religious traditions of Christians in Poland. It was both a demon and a corpse, both a human and a monster. And unlike dragons or giants that existed far away in what seemed like distant lands, the Struga was believed to come from within the community itself. It could be a neighbor, a friend, or family member. And the horror wasn't that something evil might emerge from the forest, it was that it may have been buried in the village cemetery all along. Whether the legend arose from misunderstood illness, fear of the dead, or ancient attempts to make sense of a harsh and uncertain world, the Struga remains one of Poland's most enduring supernatural figures. Even today, centuries after the villagers first whispered its name around the hearth of their fires and candlelit rooms, the tale survives as a chilling reminder of a time when the line between folklore and reality was often far thinner than we might imagine. Now that we have an idea of what the Struga is and where it comes from, I want to share with you some stories related to it that I found in my research. One of these stories isn't actually my own story, but of my idol and role model, Josh Gates. He actually did an episode in season 2, and it was not in Poland. This happened in Romania, but I still found that it related to our story. Apparently in Romania, they're called strigoi instead of striga, but it's the same kind of creature, I believe, just with a different surname to it. But the people there still believe so deeply that actually, I believe it was in the 2010s that a group of people actually desecrated a freshly buried body because they believed it was a strigoi or a striga, and they decapitated the head, did all of the rites that we mentioned earlier. And the family was so upset about it that they took the guy that led the charge to court, and he actually ended up serving some jail time. And Josh Gates actually interviewed this guy, and he said that he was so positive that what he had done was for the good of his family and for his friends and the community, that he said that he would do it again and face the same jail time because he believed it was so righteous and so true of what he'd done. Now, you know, one aspect of it, there was diseases going around in the town and stuff like that. And apparently after they did this, all this terrible stuff that was happening stopped. So whether that was just a coincidence or what, that to me has always stuck with me, and really like how deeply this is believed over there. And, you know, to me, if it's something that is that rooted in your culture, like it must have some sort of, you know, some sort of truth to it. And so with that said, I have another story here. Actually got two other stories. In our first one, it is good to note that the Struga doesn't have one famous historical encounter like the Beast of Gevanden or the Bell Witch, but instead it survives through hundreds of regional folk accounts recorded by ethnographers during the 18th and 19th century. Those accounts are actually what make this legend so compelling, as I said before. And here is one of the strangest tales that I could come across. It's known as the nobleman buried beside the church. And this account was recorded in Polish folklore and later republished in With Stake and Spade, Vampire Diversity in Poland. And it goes like this. A respected nobleman died and was buried beside a church, and soon after he was buried, strange events began to plague the building every night. windows would be shattered, candles were knocked over, and terrifying noises echoed through this church. The nobleman's widow offered a reward to anyone who could discover the cause. Stepping up to the plate, a brave young girl accepted this, and she spent the entire night inside the church. And what she witnessed would change everything. The dead nobleman would rise from his grave every night, and he would wander through the church, causing destruction, before finally returning to his burial place before the dawn. After the terrified girl told the villagers of this account, they uncovered the truth and performed the rites to stop this from happening and stop the nobleman from rising again. And again, this is just a tale, whether it's, a scary campfire tale or, a genuine account, I believe has been lost to time. But regardless, just the fact that this is even something that was possibly once considered true is mind-blowing, because it really goes to show you what fear can do to people's minds, as well as what could really be out there. Because, zombies, vampires, all the things like that have been a part of our culture and every culture for so long that it makes you really wonder, is there a piece of truth to this? So finally, we come to a more modern tale, and this happens in the early 1900s. Poland was modernizing. It was modernizing rapidly. Railroads connected cities, newspapers were very common, and science was beginning to replace many old superstitions. Yet in some rural communities, ancient beliefs still held tremendous power. One story from the area around Wayland, preserved by Polish historian Bohdan Baranowski, shows just how deeply rooted the fear of the Stragon remained. According to the account, a local man suddenly fell into what appeared to be death. He showed little sign of breathing or responsiveness and was eventually believed dead by those around him. Today, historians suspect he may have suffered from catalepsy or another medical condition capable of mimicking death. As family and neighbors gathered for a traditional wake, the man was laid onto the mourner's pad there, where they paid their respects. And then, during the vigil, something happened. The supposedly dead man began to move. And Lord have mercy, let me tell you what, I would be shitting my pants if I was at a funeral or wake and the dead person started moving. And what exactly witnesses saw has been lost to history. Perhaps he opened his eyes, shifted beneath a blanket, or attempted to sit up. Whatever occurred, panic spread through the room, and rather than believing the man was alive, many reported that the fear overtook them, and they feared the rise of a Stragon, a restless dead creature returned from the grave. And according to the story, the frightened villagers attacked and actually killed him before he could fully recover. So could you imagine being in a catatonic state and finally getting your movement and stuff back, and before you're able to say, hey, I feel better, guys, it's me, you get a stake to the chest or get your head decapitated. I know I'm kind of making light of this, but honestly, it's truly sad because, to think this probably only happened probably about 100 years ago. As I said, it's hard to tell exactly what witnesses saw, being lost to time, and whether every detail is historically accurate or not is impossible to know. But it is definitely sad and a deep reminder, like many folklore accounts actually, of what fear can do to us. And like many folklore accounts, it was recorded years later and instead of actually being documented at the time. But the story survives, and because it reveals something very important, the true power of the Struga. Its legend wasn't in the supernatural abilities, it was in the supernatural belief. Okay, so I'm going to give my final thoughts here on the Struga. While there may never be definitive proof that the Stryga truly walked the forests and villages of Poland, one fact remains undeniable. The legend endured for centuries. Generation after generation passed these stories down, not as entertainment, but as warnings. Entire communities believed in the Stryga existence strongly enough to alter burial practices, perform protective rituals, and share tales of encounters long after the events themselves have faded into history. There are countless stories, countless variations, and countless people who swore the creature was real. Whether the Stryga was born from ancient fears of death, misunderstood illnesses, or something far stranger, its place in the Polish folklore is undeniable. After all, legends don't survive for hundreds of years by accident. Something inspired these stories. Something caused people to tell them, believe them, and pass them on to their own children and grandchildren. What that something was, we'll likely never know. But for centuries throughout the forests of Poland, many believed the Stryga was waiting in the darkness. Proof that some things, once buried, refuse to stay that way. And that's another file sealed away in the Dead Air archives, guys. Thanks for listening, Deadheads. If you've enjoyed tonight's episode, be sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe. If you haven't already, guys, every listen, rating, review, and share helps us continue growing and allows us to bring you even more stories of history, mystery, and the unexplained. Don't forget to follow us on social media for behind-the-scenes content, episode updates, previews, and more. A special thank you to our sponsors, Merlin Munchie's Coffee Company and Red Herring Games, for supporting tonight's episode. And if you'd like to help preserve the wild and historic places that inspire so many of these stories, consider making a donation to the National Park Foundation. You'll find the link along with all of our socials, sponsors, and other resources down in the episode description. And join us back here next Thursday for an exciting listener roundup full of incredible first-person stories sent in by you, the listener. And if you would like to have your own story shared here on Dead Air Files, send it in to us via dead.air.files.pod@gmail.com to have your story in a listener roundup. Well, Deadheads, that's going to do it for tonight. For us here in a static order and another file sealed in the Dead Air archives, keep your ears open. You never know what might bleed through the static. Sweet, oh my, Sweet Sky Mountain, nope. Malopolis. Oh my gosh, the Polish language. What a beautiful, beautiful language. Whew.